so much to all of the panelists for joining us. We've been researching this, we've been looking into it over the past few months, trying to understand it better, but there's so much here. And it really helps to talk to people who have already looked into it, and we'll keep learning, we'll keep doing better. But this was very inspirational for all of us to have you here. Now we are going to open it up to questions from the audience. So here's what we're going to do. If you're unable to type, then you can just start asking and see if it works. But if you do have a chat available to you, then what we want to do is, if you're willing to say your question out loud, then just type the letter Q in the chat box. If you would like me to read out your question, then you can write it out and send it. But we do encourage you to interact with your voice if you are comfortable. And I will just read them out as they come through. Okay, and we already have Cecil. Cecil, do you want to mention a little bit about who you are, and then go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cecil. I've been serving as the UX designer for the Toynet team on kind of the software side of things. And I had a question for Bree, specifically what you do with your program. Besides learning technical skills, like what do the students particularly get out of the program? And how have you been able to kind of measure the success of the program itself?
Definitely. So our program is pretty comprehensive with all of the different roles that exist in technology. So how the curriculum breaks down is all of our students start with design thinking workshops. They think through the communities that they're a part of and problems that they experience in their own lives. Each student comes up with a problem that they're most passionate about solving, and then they come up with an idea for an application that they can build that addresses or helps solve that specific problem. Our students then do user research with members of the community. They come up with wireframes and prototypes for their apps, do user testing. There's so many skills that they're building throughout the program. They iterate on their designs. Once they come up with their final designs, that's when they learn programming from scratch. So they start with block-based programming and then learn Python with a Flask framework. They use MongoDB as their database. And they all learn everything they need to know to build their applications to full development. At that point, we then go into foundational sales and marketing. Our students end with a final pitch and a demo day showcase. And so at the end of the program, they have access to like career readiness counselors, as well as they're getting to know and experience like, what is it that I really enjoy doing throughout this program, and how can I hone in on my skills and build a goal and a plan for what I'm going to do next. And then so on the other side, we're working with technology companies to then place our young people, especially our adults, placing them in roles in the technology company. So at the end of the program, what is success? It's that our young people have not just a job, but a career where they're going to become managers. They can become the VP of marketing, of sales, of engineering. And so that ultimately, that's what success looks like.
That's awesome. Thank you for the answer.
I believe I saw a post that you made a while back about a young woman who designed an application where once you are interfacing with a police officer, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you can open the application. It'll walk you through some of the steps that you can take to make sure that it goes well. And she wanted to build that because of the things she was seeing around her at that time. And that really moved me as a volunteer police officer to be seeing someone so young taking such a stand within her community. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, now we are going to Adam with a question. Are you on the line?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, when you say that it costs I think it was 2.8 times more to keep someone incarcerated than to educate someone, how is that measured? Is it per year or total?
I don't remember who mentioned that statistic. Maybe it was possibly Maria or Brandon, or was it from earlier in the day?
I think it was from earlier in the day.
Okay, my understanding is you're speaking of the statistic that we had up on the screen. So they measured, okay, if all these, if this many people recidivate, then they will cost this much to have them in prison, versus if we invest in education, this many people would not, and it was taking the diff of that number amount. And I believe it was for the whole country, like if we added up the entire country. Kunal, do you remember in more detail?
So from what I was reading and what the data was saying is this is the cost that if you had done, that's the cost of education. And now it's the cost of rehousing someone that has been re-incarcerated. So the original cost is, a bump up because it's the baseline and then cost of education. But now here's the baseline plus, let's say, 5 years of reincarceration. That's why there's a marked difference.
And I'll double check on that and get back to you, Adam.
Yep.
Okay, next we have Grotto, our very own criminal justice researcher. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Just to start off, I want to thank all the panelists. You guys have been great, and all of the things that you're saying are resonating with me at a very personal level, because you guys are just giving me a refresher course of all the things I discussed in school and that I'm trying to stumble upon right now to do the work with Reclass. But for Forringer, I just had a question regarding the recent change in California legislation that now allows inmate firefighters to have their records expunged, clearing the path for them to be eligible for firefighting jobs upon release. Do you think that there's still going to be some sort of unspoken reluctance by potential employers, and just in general, like, what's your take on these skills that the inmates may obtain in prison and they're not necessarily able to use those skills because of their records, regardless of the expungement, because when they speak on their experience, that inevitably might come up?
Well, it's been my experience. I can't say anything about the data, but in a skilled profession, carpentry or electrician, employers give them a chance. They, especially in some of the hands-on fields, because there's such a lack of people that are qualified anymore. And most of the employers, tell you the truth, they say if I had been caught when I was younger, I might be in the same spot that they were in now. So now I think maybe at the same time, they keep it in the back of their mind, and if they're show up late for work or mess up on a job or don't come in, period, then they might be a little quicker to release them from employment. But I think for the most part, for my background, and I spent a lot of time in West Philadelphia, and it was almost not expected, but it wasn't a surprise to people that people had a criminal record. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that does. Thank you so much for that.
And now we will move to Aram messaged me privately. Aram, would you like to ask a question?
Hello. Hi. I guess this is a question mostly for Bree. Do you have any advice for how employers can retain engineers from underserved communities? And is there anything I can do individually as a colleague to help them stay on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate it. The tough reality is that employers generally don't want to employ people who have a record. Not fair, but that's just the plain truth. And those are the walls that I'm personally trying to break down with Code Elevate. I think that one thing it takes is, and one thing we're striving for is a big tech company to say, like, look, we are actively going to hire people who are formerly incarcerated. There's research, that economic research that shows that it's good for business. People with a record tend to have been shown to be better, like have lower turnover rates, for example, or more loyal employees. And so just trying, I think it takes like one big mover to just shake the industry or like disrupt the industry, and then others will follow. In the meantime, I think it's just like as many like companies as possible. Like if anyone, has any voice in a company, just like saying like, for example, like, hey, like we want to work with Code Elevate. Like we want to give these amazingly talented, brilliant people an opportunity to work here. And we know the classic McKinsey study, like diversity leads to a higher bottom line. What individuals can do, I would say just if you have any say at a company, just push as much as you can for it. I don't know, does anyone have any other ideas?
Hey, Bree. So my sense is that as a political scientist, all this can be legislated. To Grazio's point earlier, California banned the box in 2017 under Jerry Brown. So it's not just about encouraging employers to give them a fair shake and an honest wage. Elect legislators who are going to make a change in law so that people can have an opportunity to bounce back. And so I'm not jaded as so many other are with American politics. I firmly believe that the way to change the system is to change the law, and it starts with our state legislatures and then the Congress.
Absolutely.
That's one question I want to go off of. Since we want to work with the system, not get too jaded, how do we work with now the country is moving towards more private prisons, and it's harder to convince wardens to work with us? So what is like a selling point you guys would say to increase the participation for individuals in prison to get educational training, especially when the cost is for the more prisoners we have, the more money we make, and we're like a publicly traded NASDAQ stock as a prison company.
My view, for what it's worth, is that if the state imprisons you, the state should be responsible for your imprisonment. I'm firmly against private prisons for any number of reasons. But to that end, the challenge with these education programs that do in fact reduce recidivism is that there's a self-selection bias. So the inmates who are most likely to, or I should say the least likely to fall back into a life of crime are actually the ones who are inherently choosing to go into these programs. So that's one of the challenges that I think that it's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all for the challenge of recidivism, but to Aaron's point, it does make a huge difference. But here again, my view is that if the state incarcerates you, the state should be charged with your care, and it shouldn't be a private system or prison at all.
Absolutely, and that's one thing we think about a lot, like how much can Reclass do at a institutional level. So far, we haven't solved that problem in any way, and we've been very honest with our volunteers about it, that there's two ways to go about it. One is, to count every life you change, and then the other is, okay, but these are band-aids. How can we change the bigger structure? And that's something we will, hopefully at the next Hackday, we will have even more to talk about with that. Next, I'd like to go to Blaze, I believe is the next person.
This question's primarily for Dr. Archuleta, but I'd like to hear the opinions of any of the panelists on it. We've discussed a little bit on some of the root causes and trends that led to the prison crisis that we have right now. I'm curious to hear what you are aware of in terms of efforts that have been made historically to counter that trend, as well as this is becoming a larger and larger part of our national discourse, where you see the future trends going.
Yeah, thanks, Blaze. Nice to see your face. So I think one of the issues with this is that this has been a truly bipartisan effort. So not only did Ronald Reagan really stick it to criminal justice, but so did President Clinton in the 90s. So beyond the 80s and the Reagan administration, the Clinton administration in the 1990s saw what happened to Michael Dukakis in the '88 election. He was soft on crime. He got beat up by Willie Horton. The Willie Horton ads that Vice President Bush ran. And so Bill Clinton came in as a new Democrat from the South, and he said, we're going to be tough on crime. The Democratic Party has to reclaim this issue. We're going to be tough on crime. He wins the 92 election, and the byproduct of that is the 1994 crime bill that to this day Vice President Biden is taking heat for on the presidential campaign trail. And it just gets, it's a $30 billion bill. It gets tougher on crime. It makes it even more difficult. Remember, we already took away your access to the social safety system in the 1980s. It makes it even more difficult in the 1990s. It adds the 3 strikes rule, which is a huge problem for so many young people who are hitting these mandatory minimum sentences, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. And then the 3rd strike, it's life imprisonment for what is, in many cases, a minor drug offense. But it's their 3rd strike, and so they're out. So fast forward, the Obama administration was stifled in 2015 by the Republican Senate to make any moves on criminal justice reform. But there's nothing like an idea whose time has come. So here we have, under the Trump administration, a Republican president, a Republican legislature, and President Trump signals his interest in criminal justice reform because this is one of the issues that has that we see when the partisan circle sort of comes full circle. We see progressive reformers on the left and libertarian reformers on the right who say we need to change criminal justice in America and start reforming our prison system. And the Trump administration is able to enact the First Step Act in 2018, which reduces some of those mandatory minimum sentences. It does reintroduce some judicial discretion, but not all. And it does start to eat away at the 3 strikes rule. It's not it's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. It's the first step in reforming our criminal justice system. But what's remarkable about it is that it is a truly bipartisan effort to do that. So I'm hopeful that the next administration, whether it's a second Trump administration or a first Biden administration, is going to take the second step to what I hope is, among other things, reinstituting some level of judicial discretion, so that these judges that we hire or elect for their jurisprudence and their scholarship and their good judgment, that they have some semblance of discretion in assigning penalties under the law for alleged criminals and violations, because mandatory sentences across the board clearly have failed us for far too long.
You received a clap from Theo for that.
Can I add to that as well?
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to ask.
So I just wanted to add that we have seen a drop in our prison, or more so it's stagnant, and it has dropped in some places with our prison population. So one of the reasons for that is the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, but also in 2017 we saw a decline in prison population. That's because we did have reform in 6 states, which were New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Alaska, Vermont, I think, and I can't remember the last one. But yeah, so we are seeing small steps, right? These things are not going to happen overnight, but it's definitely refreshing to see that things are happening.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things we're noticing as we delve into this data is a lot of the data is fairly old. We love to see more new data to find out exactly what has taken a positive effect on this issue. Okay, let me go to someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Tara, could you ask your question?
Sure. I believe this has sort of been answered as questions have been related, but I don't know if we've brought up, we're in a pandemic, as we all know. And I was wondering from all the panelists how this has impacted your business. Do you already see changes happening, or do you predict there's going to be a big shift in any of the areas that you work within?
Do you mean with respect to prisons?
Respect to prisons and also their businesses.
Okay.
Or job that you do.
I can talk about my nonprofit, Code Your Dreams. The pandemic really threw us as we typically are in person for all of our education programs. And we typically hold our programs within a community center or a school. We're on for resources, because let's say we have one center where we have 15 students, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, different students. Now having every student at home, that means that our budget needs for all of our resources went up by 5x. And so I think that for us, just the move virtual just had a huge impact on our budget, and we really need to think creatively about fundraising that way. And then just from an overall learning perspective, virtual is extremely different. So needing to have both synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities for students, having more office hours throughout the week. Our team developed a library of on-demand learning videos to use at their own pace. It forced us to implement an LMS, a learning management system. So just from like a really basic education perspective, the pandemic is really difficult. And then just thinking about, it took us a long time to get computers to all of our students, to not just participate in our programs, but in schools generally. And that doesn't take into account internet. So we also provide internet to all of our young people, but knowing, for example, public school systems, one of them that I know of, students are still having trouble logging into the virtual classroom, and some teachers have maybe 40% of grades is just logging into classroom. So we're having specifically disadvantaged students right now who are failing because they don't have access to internet. So this pandemic, so many levels, providing challenges.
Yeah, we can definitely relate to that. We had this whole like in-person classroom, like everyone works together environment going on, and then pandemic hits and we can't even get in the door. And we're just trying to figure out how to get one machine in there and say, hey, can you give this to one of your students once a week? That, like, if we get one person to take our curriculum in January, we would be so excited. And that speaks to another point of, this isn't just in prisons. If you don't have access to internet at home, no matter how old you are, your learning has stopped until you can get access to schools. And so that really is relevant. Thank you for your question, Tara. I think we have space for one more question, and we are going to throw it back to Cecil.
I actually had my question answered. It was really around like changing the stigma around hiring, incarcerated veterans. So I think everyone's really answered that.
Awesome. And Grotto is also on the list.
Yeah, thank you. No, this question was just for any of the panelists that would like to touch on it. Just in general, what are your thoughts on future research topics that you believe may be useful for the public and to get them engaged with the Project Reclass mission? We covered recidivism lightly, but we're trying to see how to narrow down other items which may be good to touch upon related to the criminal justice intersect and what we're trying to do our reclass.
So I can mention something. I definitely think that it's important. I think that a lot of Americans, I don't think, are aware of what the numbers are for other industrialized countries. And when you look at the numbers and you compare the US to other countries, we should be comparable to other industrialized countries. So looking at Norway, France, Sweden. So I think that it's really important talking about what those countries are doing. that are so vastly different from the US. And again, how I really think that we need to push educational programs. I think that's the biggest thing.
Any other inputs on this? Okay, and I think we will close out with Aram. I think she has a follow-up. Are you on the line?
Yes, just to follow up on my earlier question, after engineers from underserved communities are hired, is there anything you would encourage employers to do to retain them?
Yeah, I would say being like well connected with the city support. So knowing all the various support systems. We know that trauma is deep and that a lot of the people that we work with are especially after, coming out of prison, like are dealing with so much trauma. So tech companies might not be hiring someone on staff who can, help out with daily needs, but just being connected with other support systems, being more understanding, and just having those systems in place.
Much.
Okay. So I actually gave my little thing about how we should, if you want to get involved, apply on the website. It's projectreclass.org/get involved. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for taking time. I've learned so much just from this 1 hour together with you all, and I think all of our volunteers and our guests who have joined us today can say the same. We really appreciate your time. Kunal and I are going to stay on the line past 5 p.m. in case there's anyone who wants to apply and wants to ask more questions, or if you know anybody who might be interested in our cause, maybe you're not ready to volunteer, but you know someone who would be interested, please have a chat with us. And otherwise, this concludes Hackday. I will pass it back to Kunal.
Once again, I want to thank all 4 panelists for coming and for spending an hour of their time with us this afternoon and giving us some of their wisdom. That being said, I would really encourage anyone that joined this call from abroad or like was not within our Reclass circle to really think about joining Project Reclass and what we're doing. And I hope you've had a chance to see all the hard work we put in this summer as a group, and you're excited if you are on the mission track to see what we're doing in the future. So that being said, I just want to thank everyone individually. So Ms. Caplan, thank you for all the work you do, especially with, you work with teens and young youth involved, justice involved youth. Ms. Thornton, thank you for everything you do for the veterans that we have that are getting out of the service and helping them transition. Mr. Forringer, thank you for everything you did working in West Philadelphia, for all the work you had with the parolees. For Major Archuleta, thank you for developing one of the best artillery officers that's about to stop being artillery officer soon. So I'm sorry I have to say goodbye to our bond, but thank you so much for all the encouragement and all the help, especially with this panel discussion. You were a great mediator, and you had a lot of information that you shared with me as a young cadet that you're able to share with everybody here.
With that, we will adjourn Hackday. Thank you to all of the new guests. We hope to hear from you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you for what you do. Bye.